Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. Once again, I'm your host, Dean Simon, and before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are still on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if that's a journey that you feel compelled to join, please press that big red subscribe button down below and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, now for some rather unfortunate updates or rather unfortunate news. There's a lot of glaring issues, and the one thing that I pointed out here on the title of the segment is the rebounding, but man, we all know that there's a lot more that the Bucks need to improve upon if they want to continue to regain momentum, stay towards the top of the Eastern Conference, going towards the middle of the season, towards the All-Star break, and obviously towards the end of the 82 game slate. One of them, though, probably the biggest one, and probably the most evident that fans and media members alike have been seeing is the rebounding, and specifically the offensive rebounding, or at least allowing their opponents to grab offensive rebounds and then not really grabbing as many for themselves. If you look at all of the, if you go on NBA.com, look at the all opponent related stats like opponent field goal makes, opponent field goal percentage, opponent rebounds, especially if you look at opponent rebounds. I have it up right in front of me. The Milwaukee Bucks officially are bottom five in opponent rebounding. They let up 26.3. Oh wait, no, that's assists. They let up 46.7 rebounds to their opponents on a nightly basis, and of course, that's after the Charlotte Hornets game where Ryan Kalkbrenner and Moussa Diabate completely destroyed them on both the offensive and defensive boards. So yeah, the Bucks are a bottom five opponent rebounding team. But if you look at opponent offensive rebounds, wouldn't you know it? They're also bottom five. They are 26th in opponent offensive rebounds. They let up almost 13 offensive rebounds per game. How incredible is that for the Milwaukee Bucks? And this is a thing that has started to develop and really become more of a and it's you can't ignore it anymore. And every time the Bucks go to box out, it's kind of like watching a car crash. It's like you can't help but you want to look away, but you can't help but watch. And that became more evident against the Houston Rockets, against the best rebounding and offensive rebounding team in the league, and one of the best offensive rebounding teams of all time, with Steven Adams and Clint Capella didn't even really have that much of an effect, but Steven Adams, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., even Kevin Durant and Amen Thompson got in there for some offensive boards, and this is the biggest issue that is plaguing this team right now. Also, when you look at opponent 3-point percentage, I want to say it was the Bucks actually they do have some pretty good ranks. It's not like this team has no avenue to kind of get where they want to be in terms of opponent. I don't know why I keep wanting to say offensive instead of opponent. Opponent 3-point percentage, the Bucks are sixth. They allow their opponents to shoot only 33.5% from 3-point range. An opponent 3-point makes, I want to say they're fifth in the league. They only allow teams to make 11.8 threes, which in this day and age, in this modern game, is a pretty awesome number. But one thing is that the Milwaukee Bucks don't force as many turnovers as I'd like them to. They don't grab as many rebounds as I'd like them to. And what all of these things do in the long run is just limits opportunities and creates opportunities for the other teams to get second chance opportunities and easier ways of scoring, whether it's in transition, whether it's right at the basket after an offensive rebound, or a kick out to a three-pointer after an offensive rebound. All of these things culminate into the simple fact of the Bucks are just giving way too many teams way too many easy opportunities that could easily be taken away and just ended if they grab a defensive rebound, if they make a little bit of a smarter decision with the ball in their hands. So some sweeping changes. This kind of issue cannot be ignored any longer. And I know that these have to be talking points that Doc Rivers and the rest of the coaching staff are going over every night, or at least after this last string of games. Oh, and especially against the Kings, the offensive rebounds were ridiculous. But these have to be talking points that Doc Rivers is trying to hammer into these guys' heads, but it does not seem to be working at all. This is just completely unacceptable to allow your opponents to grab as many offensive rebounds as they do and create so many second chance opportunities. And aside, oh my goodness, aside from the team perspective, or like the team being able to limit opponents and doing these kinds of things and in certain stat categories, as an individual, we need to have a conversation about Gary Trent Jr. because what is happening? I figured that maybe Gary Trent Jr. had the chance to be one of the more consistent Milwaukee Bucks on this roster because he's one of the few guys, including, it's a short list of he, Kyle Kuzma, and, and Miles Turner, you can say, that have had experience on previous teams having a lot more of a role, and Kevin Porter Jr. as well, you could say, having a lot more of a role or an impact on directly them scoring the ball in a more on-ball capacity or just having more of a role in their team's offense in general. Of course, Kyle Kuzma coming up with the Lakers played a huge role in them winning a title. Kevin Porter Jr., when he first came in the league with the Houston Rockets, he was kind of given the keys as their starting point guard and, averaged 18, 20 points a game and was kind of that guy for them. And of course, Miles Turner, we know what he's done with the Indiana Pacers throughout the first decade of his career. And Gary Trent Jr. joins those guys on that kind of list where when he was with the Toronto Raptors a couple of years ago, he was a guy that was averaging 17, 18 points a game, knocking down crazy numbers of threes on crazy good efficiency. And it seemed like maybe he would be able to, now being surrounded by even more shooting, be able to quickly find a groove. But that has proved to be the exact opposite. It's almost like as the season has started to roll and the opponents have started to get a little bit harder, or the opponents have gotten to be a little bit better at defending the 3-point shot, Gary Trent Jr. has just seemed to have lost his mojo and lost all confidence. He's not even really getting shots up. He's averaging 5 points a game, a solid 5 points a game over his last 5 games on, I would like to venture, between 30 and 35% from the field and around the same from 3-point range, because that's where he's kind of been hanging around for the majority of the season. We need to start having real conversations about Gary Trent Jr. because as the starting small forward, this is just not going to cut it if he's going to keep offering the same kind of productivity. And this is what makes it really hard to keep Kyle Kuzma on the bench with how well he's been playing, because now there's probably a whole crowd developing of, again, Bucks fans and media members alike saying that Kyle Kuzma has clearly earned his right to jump back into the starting lineup after the first 11, 12 games. And and just from a fit perspective, it wouldn't be the right move. Now that you've seen him do so well off the bench, and now he's the one that's actually been able to find a rhythm, you don't want to mess with that at all. You don't want to take him kind of out of his natural habitat as the Bucks' 6th or 7th man, and put Gary Trent Jr. on the bench, because then if you start Kyle Kuzma, maybe there's a chance that for whatever reason in his head, he feels like when he's in the starting lineup, he has to kind of force the issue too much, or that he has to kind of jack up more threes if he's in that group alongside the Ryan Rollins and AJ Greens of the world, and and when he's next to Taurean Prince once he gets back and once he's healthy, maybe that'll mess with his mindset and just his way of attacking defenses instead of how he's been putting his head down, going right to the basket with reckless abandon, how he has off the bench. Maybe if he was a starter, it would be different, and he would kind of lean back into his old ways. And even though it may be more beneficial for a guy like Gary Trent Jr., who relies heavily on that 3-point shot and kind of being fed open looks, maybe it would be better for him to come off the bench. You wouldn't want to mess with Kyle Kuzma's hot streak that he's been on, even though the last game against Charlotte was a stinker. The first in a while, though, for Kyle Kuzma. But man, what do we do with Gary Trent Jr.? I feel like maybe it's not time, obviously, to replace him in the starting lineup with this person in the segment, but every episode I go into for the last 3 or 4 episodes, I've been telling myself I need to mention that Victor Oladipo is a member of the Wisconsin Herd. I don't know why, for whatever reason, it keeps slipping my mind that, I know that he's there, but I always forget to mention it. But Victor Oladipo, one of my favorite all-time NBA players, is attempting a meteoric comeback in the NBA after playing overseas and getting a chance this preseason to show NBA teams that he's the real deal once again. He re-entered the G League player pool recently, and he signed with the Wisconsin Herd. And in his first game, put up about 11 points, a couple rebounds, a couple of assists on a little over 40% from the field. He looked pretty good. And though maybe the complete athletic burst is not what it once was, of course, because, his prime really to this point was about 7 years ago, Victor Oladipo could be really the perfect veteran option once he's kind of ramped up even more and we can prove that he can kind of stick with a certain regimen and be available for these games. Maybe Victor Oladipo can earn his way to a call up and make an actual difference for this Milwaukee Bucks rotation at the main NBA level. It would just be a really, really cool story for the guy, but also with Gary Harris, it seems like every time he enters a game, it's an immediate turnover or an immediate wrong, mental miscue or mistake that he makes. It seems as though Gary Harris has not been that guy through the limited minutes that he's been playing. And of course, we know the struggles of Amir Coffey to open the season, but maybe Victor Oladipo, if he can prove to be able to put the ball in the basket at somewhat of a consistent rate and still get down and defend, which is still his kind of main superpower to this point, maybe he earns a opportunity to show that he can really make a difference at the NBA level, because at his core, his intangibles and his IQ for the game are all still there. It's just a matter of, can he keep up with today's NBA players with the elevated, you know, rate of athleticism that these guys are developing with. Can he still hang? And I certainly believe that he can, just a matter of availability. So I felt it was maybe worth it to mention that if the Bucks figured that drastic times call for drastic measures, give Victor Oladipo a call, more specifically, give him a call up and give him an opportunity to prove once again that he can help a contending team, or at least the Bucks want to be a contending team if they want to get to where they're going. Maybe just give him a shot to prove that he can affect winning. But the rematch with the Charlotte Hornets coming up on Friday, and there's no two ways about it. I usually don't say this early in the season, this is going to be game 13 of the season, that this is a must win, but that's what it feels like going into a back-to-back game against the Hornets after you got smashed on their home court. You must be the ones to do the smashing. You cannot lose two consecutive games to this Charlotte Hornets team, especially when they've given you a day off to kind of go over the game plan and watch the film and really analyze how these guys kind of systematically broke you down. Against a team like this, it would just be completely, you can't make an excuse. Inexcusable is the word that I'm looking for. It would be inexcusable for the Bucks to lose a second straight game to this Hornets roster, no matter how good they are, for how young they are. They can stop guys like Miles Bridges, and they kind of did in that game on Wednesday night. It was, yeah. Um, they stopped Miles Bridges. Colin Sexton didn't have the best shooting game, but he just controlled the pace of the game so well and was flying up and down the floor. They can control, hopefully, a guy like Con Knipple, even though he looks to be a really consistent guy on both ends of the floor. He was a real joy to watch. Um, but this is a team that you better be able to control, again, if you want to get to the places where you're going or where you'd like to go. Um, Again, just inexcusable. There's no way that the Milwaukee Bucks do not come away from this rematch with a win and split this kind of early season series. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. Once again, I've been your host, Dean Simon, and before you go, please leave that like, leave that comment down below. Do you think the Bucks are going to pull out a victory against the mighty Eastern Conference Titan Charlotte Hornets? And subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I will see you guys in the next one.